Hi everybody, I'm Kurt Staley, that plastics guy, and I'm bringing you a tech tip for Friday. And today I want to talk about long glass resins. What are they, where might you use them, and what are the advantages? And to do that, I borrowed from the internet a graphic from LFT, and I believe they are a Chinese resin producer, a compounder of long glass polypropylene, so thank you for that. And I do have to declare it is theirs. So first of all, we're going to put this in the context of long glass versus what we're probably more used to seeing, a short glass pellet. So I'm just going to turn and we'll get into that. So a short fiber length pellet, this particular graphic is showing a 0.3 millimeter. We may also think of that as about 1/8 of an inch, give or take. And this is what we typically see on the shop floor when we're thinking about a glass-filled polypropylene or a glass-filled nylon. Now these materials are super common. They boost the characteristics of the carrier resin, typically in strength and durability, as this graph, which we'll get to in a moment, would bear out. Now, if you'll notice, in a short glass, the 0.3 millimeter strand, these strands come pre-cut. They're put into the compounding line. They're mixed and strand cut into the pellets that we're seeing here. But you'll notice that there's quite a random orientation, so that can cause problems with warping during cooling, and it's a very common issue with glass-filled material to have some degree of warp. Now, if we consider the long glass, well, let's see, 6 to 25 millimeter. I was actually just quoting a client this morning on a 1.2 millimeter long glass polypropylene material, so I've got some familiarity with it. But the length of the glass fiber is the length of the pellet. You'll notice the orientation is straight. There's nothing sort of jumbled up, and we can change the content of the glass filler, the long glass filler, in the pellet. So we can go from 10 to about 50%. I think some manufacturers may go as high as 60, but 50 seems to be a sweet spot on the maximum end. But I just want to draw your attention to the fact that these are straight pieces of glass. That has to do with some of the capital equipment requirements of how this is compounded, pulling glass through a line and wetting out the glass. The pellets, the strands are cut to length, and you have your product ready for sale. Now, where might you consider using a long glass material? Well, it's kind of interesting. This may actually be, despite it being a more expensive product than a short glass pellet, it may actually be a cost down depending on where you're coming from. If you're using a more expensive kind of esoteric type of engineered resin, a long glass nylon or a long glass polypropylene may give you a cost down. Plus, you've got the familiarity of running a more conventional commodity-based resin, the carrier resin, instead of something like a PPS, which may require an oil heater on the mold, which it offers, you get into elements of complexity, and there's maybe some concerns about safety as well. These are very conventional in terms of how they run. You do have to have some tooling considerations. Sprue and runner and gate land, that kind of thing has to accommodate a long glass pellet, and you have to work with your tooling partner to identify the special needs that that particular tool and part will have to accommodate this type of material. So where are you going to use it? As a cost down from a higher end resin. Secondly, you may wish to consider a long glass material if you are looking at a metal replacement. I've seen many times in my career metal parts replaced, and I'm thinking of things like cross-car barriers, cross-car beams behind the instrument panel, where you might have mounting pickup points for a steering column or HVAC components, that type of thing. As we know with injection molding, you can get very complex part geometry pretty simply, as long as you avoid issues like die lock. And the long glass can be injection molded into relatively complex parts. It is a thermoplastic. Now we have to, again, as I said, with sprue and runner systems, gates, land, that type of thing, make sure we accommodate this kind of material. But in terms of what it can actually fill in a tool, it's very versatile. Front end module, rear end module carriers, that type of thing, excellent choice for a long glass material. And if there are metal components in those carriers, this may be a material that you can use to reduce part count, commonize material, and make it all plastic and recyclable for end-of-life considerations. So great, there's a couple of areas where this might be very helpful. And what are you gaining when you go to this type of material? Well, as this chart very rightfully points out, as you increase fiber length and also the percentage of the fiber in the pellet, you get extra stiffness, strength, and toughness. So if you've ever worked with fiberglass matting reinforced with your typical polyester, not polyethylene, polyester carrier resin, if you're working on a boat repair or a car repair, or something around the house that uses that type of repair material, you'll know just how strong that resin gets when it's been reinforced with fiberglass matting. Well, the same principle applies, but rather than a matting, which we can't injection mold, we have long strands of fiberglass, and it sort of takes us in that general direction of stiffness, strength, and toughness. And it is remarkably stronger than a short glass material. So consider it. It's an option in your tool belt if you're taking on a very challenging application, or you're trying to look at how to get away from a very expensive, unusual resin. Perhaps this is the solution for you. So until next week, I hope you've enjoyed this slightly different format, and maybe we'll try something like this again soon with different pictures, different things to talk about. But I think I've got this more or less dialed in from the white balance standpoint on the camera, on the AV side of things, and it's been a lot of fun doing this one. So until next week, take care, have a great Friday, a great weekend, and bye for now.